The Qin Dynasty, the last Chinese dynasty and one of its largest, was ruled by the ethnic Manchu people. But that wasn't actually the first time these people have conquered and ruled China. Before they became Manchus, they were actually known as Jurchens, and they had previously ruled northern China between the 12th and 13th century. In this episode, I will tell you the history of the Jurchen Jin Dynasty and how they used identity politics to rule. In the year 1115, deep inside the Khitan Liao territory, Wanyan Aguda established the Jurchen Jin Dynasty. According to the official Jin Dynasty history, they claim to be descended from the Mote people, who inhabited Balhae, and Aguda's ancestor migrated from Goryeo, Korea. Both the Khitans and Jurchens were often mistaken to be completely nomadic pastoralist people. Part of their society actually do practice agriculture, but in comparison to the Khitans, the Jurchens are less nomadic and certain segments of them led a more sedentary lifestyle. The two of them also have different languages. Now, the Jurchens hated the Khitans. Khitan envoys denigrated the Jurchens and even demanded to sleep with the Jurchen noble women. The Jurchens actually didn't mind giving them lower-class women, but requesting to sleep with their noble women is a major no-no. Then, in 1112, when the Khitan emperor was feasting, he ordered the Jurchen chiefs to dance for them. On that occasion, only Wanyan Aguda was brave enough to refuse to dance. After the death of his brother, he was then elected as the chief of the Jurchens and he began to plot his rebellion. So in 1114, after gathering a group of cavalrymen, he captured some Khitan outposts and won a few significant victories despite being outnumbered. Emboldened by these victories, he established his Jin Dynasty in 1115 and built up a tumen of 10,000 warriors. The Khitans couldn't possibly let this stand, of course, so they, with an army of 700,000, rode against the Jurchens. But the moment their leading column of 100,000 was defeated, the rest of them just scattered. With this momentous victory, the Jurchens' fame grew exponentially. Other tribes started to abandon the Khitan to join them, and even the Han Chinese-led Song Dynasty scrambled to form an alliance with the Jurchens to defeat their common arch-nemesis, the Khitans. I'm sure a lot of you must be wondering, how in the world did the Khitans become so weak? Well, this has a lot to do with a series of succession crises and power struggle they had been having. There is also a very incompetent and unpopular emperor on the Liao dynasty throne, Emperor Tianzuo. Despite all his shortcomings, he had an abundance of luck and survived multiple coup attempts. But by the time of Aguda's uprising, his army was fed up with him, and even his Khitan generals defected to the Jurchens. Wanyan Aguda died in 1123, aged 55. But his cause to overthrow the Khitans lived on with his people and his brother, Wanyan Seng, who succeeded him. After launching a pincer attack together with Song against the Liao, by 1125, the Jurchens successfully crushed the Khitans. Some of the Khitan nobles then escaped west to form the Kara Khitai. During this struggle, the Jurchens discovered that the Song army, which was led by the eunuch general Tong Guan, was no help at all. In his incompetence, he was driven back by the Khitans 2 times, while the Jurchens army just rolled over the Khitan defenses like it was nothing. The original promise was that they would each get whatever territory they managed to conquer. And the Song really wanted to have their strategic 16 prefectures, which was lost to the Khitan, back. But before they knew it, the Jurchens had pushed all the way into the territory. They were just too powerful. So then, the Jurchens charitably offered to sell the Liao southern capital and part of the territory to the Song for the equivalent of 1 year's tribute of what they would have paid to the Khitans. It was a pretty good deal, but after they acquired the city, they discovered that it had been completely looted and the city's population had been taken away as slaves. In history, it's pretty common for the oppressed to turn into the oppressor. The Jin Dynasty had a pretty bad reputation in both Chinese history and Mongol history because they both had been oppressed by the Jurchens, and they seemed to practice slavery quite extensively. They had even launched the Toei invasion to Japan 100 years prior, in 1019, to capture Japanese slaves. The alliance between the two eventually collapsed after the Song harbored a fugitive the Jin Dynasty was after. So the Jurchens launched an invasion by the end of 1125. And in the early 1126, the reigning Song Dynasty Emperor Huizong made his son the new emperor. He didn't want to deal with any of this mess and just ran away. Huizong was a great painter, but he wasn't really an emperor material. As for his son, he wasn't that much better either. He was indecisive and had stupidly sent his brother, a prince, to negotiate a truce with his enemy, leading to his capture and becoming a bargaining chip. Since they had the upper hand, the Jurchens negotiated a truce which was heavily in their favor against the Song. They demanded a massive amount of annual tribute and revived the Khitan model of dynastic relations with the Song. The Song Dynasty Emperor will have to call himself the nephew emperor, while the Jin Emperor became the uncle emperor. This was a very humiliating deal which not only recognized Jin's legitimacy as Chinese emperor, but also their superiority. That's why, not long after the treaty was signed, the Song side immediately tried to double-cross the Jurchens by trying to turn the ethnic Khitan envoys from Jin into their double agent. But the Khitans just immediately reported the plot to the Jin Emperor. Enraged by this plot, the Jurchens immediately launched a second invasion against the Song. The Song army stood no chance against them. They had become ineffective because the dynasty had focused too much on civil service and forgetting to cultivate its army. In addition to that, the emperor was dumb enough to be fooled by a charlatan, who claimed that he could summon divine soldiers from heaven to protect the capital. Unsurprisingly, the divine soldiers never materialized, and they did not transfer enough real soldiers to the capital to defend it. The Song capital was captured in no time, and the aftermath was a tragedy of immense proportion known as the Jinkang incident. The treasury and everything valuable was completely looted, and the citizenry were told to give up their possession or face death. As for the royal family, they and all the bureaucrats, skilled workers, craftsmen, engineers, scientists, women, and countless others were enslaved. They were then forced to march back to the Jin capital, and many died while making the arduous trek. The men were sold for cheap as slaves, and the women became concubines. As for the two emperors, they were given Khitan wives. Hold on, is this supposed to be a punishment? Yes. Really? Yes, but not for you, it's punishment for the Khitan women. The Khitans were treated worse, they assured them. Besides this being part of the cultural practice, one of the reasons for this slave-taking is due to the lack of manpower on the Jurchen side. They had powerful cavalry force, but they severely lacked the manpower to administer the whole of China. Even if they could conquer the rest of Song, they wouldn't be able to hold onto it or manage it. At that moment, it was more rational to exact tributes while they built enough skill and capacity to conquer the rest of China. That's why they also created puppet states with local Chinese leaders for a while at the start of their dynasty. As time progressed, the Jurchens would get more sinicized. The more Chinese they become, the more justification they have in conquering the rest of China. So they adopted the Chinese imperial customs and Confucian education. As I've said in the previous episode, Confucianism is not just made up of a single book like the Bible for Christianity. It is a set of literature and ethics which doubles as basis for education. So if you want to learn civil administration or poetry, you will get Confucianism as part of the package. It is like how Greek philosophy is strongly tied to classical Western education. There were significant pushback from the traditionalist Jurchen elites, of course, but the process was never completely halted. Meanwhile, down south, the surviving brother of the Song royalty re-established the Song Dynasty, and this second half of the Song Dynasty period is known as the Southern Song Dynasty. The renowned general Yue Fei, who became the Chinese symbol of patriotism for assisting the Jin invasion, was active during this period. I will cover his story another time. You know, it does get pretty awkward for the Jin royalty to claim that they are Chinese, while the Han Chinese-led Song Dynasty still existed in the south. So the Jurchens continued the strategy the Khitan used and started to call only their own ethnic Han Chinese as Hanren, or Han people, and call the Southern Han Chinese Nanren, which literally means Southern people, or just Songren, because in their eyes they don't count. This is really just a good old divide and conquer strategy used by many empires. In reaction, the Song became increasingly more conservative. While the Liao dynasty existed, they had already banned Khitan clothing. And as the Jin royalty paid respect to the ancestral altar of Chinese emperors, including Cao Cao, we can see a shift in the political narrative and popular folk story of Song too. Liu Bei, the historical character who was also featured in the Romance of the Three Kingdoms novel, became increasingly more favored and considered legitimate in southern Song. I actually discussed the evolution of this novel in greater detail in a previous episode, and I also have a summary series of it too. The Song, also sometimes called the Han people in the north Beiren, or Northern people, at times even go as far as calling them Fan, or barbarian, as they were ruled by the barbarian Jurchens. The Jurchens were also pretty adept at tribal politics, playing the Mongol steppe tribes against each other, preventing them from growing too big and becoming a threat. When a group became too powerful, they supported another to keep things in check. Ong Han, Temujin's benefactor for example, was assisted by the Jurchens to defeat the Tatars. But eventually, Temujin would take on the title of Chinggis Khan and went on to conquer the Jin Dynasty. In the process, a lot of the unhappy Han Chinese, Khitans, and even the Jurchens living under Jin Dynasty's rule defected and joined the Mongols. Ironically, in the Mongol Yuan Dynasty caste system, Mongol, Semu, Han, and Nan would haphazardly place the Khitans, Jurchens, and Northern Han Chinese, including the Koreans, in the Han category. They then followed the Jin's convention to categorize the Southern Song Dynasty people as Southern people. This hierarchy seemed to be based on who joined the Mongols first. Later in the Ming Dynasty, a few different types of Jurchens were identified: Jianzhou, Haixi, and Wild Jurchens. It was the Jianzhou Jurchens who later combined their tribes with some Mongol tribes and some Han Chinese to form the Manchu. They engineered this ethnicity so that they can become large enough to conquer China and rule it after the fall of the Ming Dynasty. As you can see here, ethnicity and identity is a game of politics. It can be separated or combined to serve the purpose of those in power. On the next episode, we will do something light. I will compare the difference between Zhuge Liang, Kong Ming in history and fiction, and also how Romance of the Three Kingdoms became so popular in Japan. Remember to subscribe so that you won't miss the episode. Before I go, I would like to thank all our patrons on Patreon for supporting the channel, and all you viewers for liking and sharing this video. By the way, you can follow me on Twitter and Facebook if you want more of my musings. Until next time, stay cool my bros.